Hey, I'm Hannah Weiss, the Director of Education at the Science Museum of Western Virginia, and this is your Moment of STEM. And this week, we're going to talk about Star Wars. So this week ends in May the 4th, and like the good little geek that I am, I don't think I can get through it without talking about the combination of science and Star Wars. And yes, I do know that I talked about Avengers last week, and I'm talking about Star Wars right now, and that's a choice, and it's a choice that I've made. So yeah, the science of Star Wars. A lot of times when people talk about that, they talk about what Star Wars got wrong. And I'm not going to lie, there is a lot that they got wrong. I don't think science was at the top of the priority list for Star Wars, but there's also a lot that they got right. More interesting to me, though, is that there's a ton of science that was inspired by Star Wars. See, just like I grew up with Star Wars, so did a ton of other people who became scientists and engineers and mathematicians and economists and everything else. And they've done some really cool stuff. One of my favorite pieces of research to come out of Star Wars is a team who used Darth Vader's signature breathing as a way to teach students to recognize respiratory illnesses. As part of the paper, they even examined where a kind of Darth Vader's breathing difficulties came from, and unsurprisingly decided it had to do with the inhalation of volcanic gas and rock. They also figured out that his suit was probably a hyperbaric pressure suit, something designed to help him breathe better, and maybe even help with his skin. Of course, the authors of the paper also thought that a lung transplant might have been a better way to help him, but I guess that was just beyond imperial medicine. Another really, really cool bit of research to come out of the combination of Star Wars and science is that a team of analysts decided to tackle the Death Star and figure out if they could identify the same exploit, the same thing that the Rebel Alliance used to blow it up. So they used two different analytical techniques, one that was super new and one that actually would have been around in the 70s. And they only gave themselves 4 days, which is about the amount of time that the Rebel Alliance had from getting the plans to figuring out what they did. One of their techniques took 10 days, so wasn't going to work for the rebels, and didn't actually identify the exhaust port. The second and more modern technique that they used did, but decided that it probably wouldn't have been the best way to kind of deal with the Death Star. In fact, their solution was to have R2-D2 hack into the Death Star and upload a virus, which really would have been a very different movie. My favorite bit of research, though, to come out of Star Wars and science is this really fantastic example of the twin paradox, right? Okay, so the twin paradox is something in general relativity, and it describes the fact that, or the idea that, if you are traveling really, really fast, the way that you're going to be experiencing time slows down. The idea being that if you and a twin kind of left Earth traveling on different ships at different speeds, you and your twin would have different ages at the end of it because you were experiencing time differently. So some students at a university actually applied this to Luke and Leia, who, spoiler alert for a really old franchise, I guess, are twins, and figured out that by the end of the movies, they would be drastically different ages. In fact, just between the time from their trips to Cloud City and Dagobah, they would be about 2 years different ages because of the speeds that they were traveling at and the ships that they were on. So if you'd like to dig any deeper into any of the research that I talked about, or some more of the crazy science that Star Wars has inspired, you can check out any of the links below. Otherwise, I'm Hannah Weiss from the Science Museum of Western Virginia. And the one thing that still just really disappoints me is that we don't have lightsabers. Physics just says no.